We are beginning our opening ceremony of the International Seminar, Democracy and New Technologies, Challenges for the Digital Era. The event is part of the celebrations of the bicentenary of the Brazilian Senate. We inform you that we are transmitting this event live on the Senate TV, and we have the participation of e-Cidadania, where the public can send their questions and suggestions. The opening panel is composed by excellent President of the Senate, Senator Rodrigo Pacheco, professor from the south of California, Berkeley, MIT, Oxford, and Cambridge, and ex-minister of Spain, Mr. Manuel Castells, the first Secretary of the Federal Senate and President of the Commission of the 200 years of the Brazilian Senate, Senator Rogério Carvalho. We have the General Director of the Federal Senate, we have the General Secretary of the Federal Senate, Mr. Gustavo Saboia, and the General Consultant of the Legislative Advisory Body, Mr. Danilo Augusto Barbosa de Aguiar. We ask you that you stand up in respect for the national anthem presented by the musician Marcelo Duarte, a music student from the University of Brasilia.
O Seminário Internacional
The International
Democracia e novas
Seminar,
tecnologias,
Democracy and New
desafios da era
Technologies,
digital,
Challenges of the
tem o
Digital
objetivo
Era,
de promover
has the goal of
debates
promoting
acerca das
discussions
profundas
about the deep
transformações sociais
transformations
vivenciadas na
that are
atualidade,
being
em
experienced in
decorrência
today's
do uso
society due
disseminado
to
das
the use,
tecnologias digitais,
disseminated
com
use of
vistas
digital
a identificar
technologies in order
desafios
to
e
identify
possíveis caminhos
challenges and
para
possible
garantir
pathways forward
benefícios e,
to
ao mesmo
ensure
tempo,
benefits and at the same time
proteção quanto a
protect the
eventuais
society
riscos e ameaças
against
decorrentes do novo
occasional
cenário
risks
tecnológico.
of this new technological
Nesse momento,
scenario.
será exibido
Right now,
vídeo
we will
institucional
show an
produzido pela TV
institutional video
Senado
produced by
sobre
the
o
Senate
bicentenário
TV
do Senado
about the
brasileiro.
200 years of the Brazilian Senate.
Há 200 anos,
200 years ago, Brazil took a first step in the creation of the Senate. And it started to pave the way forward to a representative democracy. The Senate played a decisive role for the maintenance of stability, political stability in the main period of the monarchy period of the Brazilian history. Brazil's greatest challenge was the maintenance of the territorial integrity. Over 2 centuries and 3 different addresses, the Senate was the floor for many decisions important for the future of the country. The Senate is present in all the decisions that end up approving laws that are decisive for the life of Brazilians in the 19th century. Senate was present in the discussions regarding the abolition laws of slavery, and the Senate was very important in the resolution of conflict. Throughout all the Republic, the greatest political crises that happened in Brazil were resolved in Parliament. And when Parliament could not resolve them, there was a rupture. Essential for the political stability of Brazil, the Senate promotes discussions, approved transformative laws, abolished injustices, conquered rights, went through crises, and was silenced. It inspected, it investigated, it judged, reformed, and innovated. The concept of democracy that we have today did not exist in the 19th century. In the last few centuries, the Senate began to transform itself because it starts to count on people that are more directly connected to the Brazilian society. And it's representative, and it tries to be more and more participatory. As time goes on and the participation of Brazilian society increases, the more the Senate gets closer to the true physiognomy of the Brazilian society. This is the house of political plurality. It's a space for dialogue. It's the birth of laws that expanded the horizons of Brazil. It's a guardian of democracy. Federal Senate, 200 years of history.
At this moment, we
invite to take the floor the first Secretary of the Federal Senate, Senator Rogério Carvalho, President of the Curation Committee of the 200 Years for the Brazilian Senate. Good morning, everyone, to all of the representatives of the Parliament who pay homage in our seminar. A special greeting, and I would like to greet the President of the Federal Senate, Senator Rodrigo Pacheco, and I would like to greet Professor of the South California University, Berkeley, Oxford, Cambridge, and former Minister of Spain, Mr. Manuel Castells, the General Director of the Federal Senate, Ms. Dr. Ilana Trombica, and the Secretary of the panel, Gustavo Saboia, and the consultation from the Federal Senate, Mr. Aguiar. I would like to start my opening remarks thanking for the President of the Federal Senate, Senator Rodrigo Pacheco, who brought us a very clear view of what we are going to be dedicated in this international seminar: democracy and new technologies, challenges of the digital era. This is the topic of this gathering with notorious experts coming from several places, Brazil and abroad. In fact, our topic on the following days demands from us a deep discussion and a comprehensive. There is no space for reductionism when we talk about the complex relationships between democracy and technology. The potentialities of this are always pondered by the risks. Our task here, especially as legislators, would be to ensure that in this battle, the democratic values can overcome disinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, democracy, as you know, it's a regime where the citizens have equal political rights, and they exercise them through representation. It's the government of the people in the Greek philosophy, and it's the ultimate value of what we do in this house during our terms. It occurs that the effective implementation of this value is not that simple. There are difficult logistics details that we face every day, and that's why we have the importance of technology and the digital are offered and offers valuable mechanisms to ensure the voice to each citizen. We cannot leave aside these resources, and different from that, we must advance towards the direct popular participation in the political decision-making. On the other hand, in the previous years, we could see or witnessing the evil use of the new technologies in politics. During the democratic values, the dissemination of false information and fake news and isolation in bubbles and in informational bubbles, encouraging hate and intolerance through the social media. And we also had the violent attacks in January 8, 2023 to the democratic institutions as an example that the digital media are used against the public interest. All the evil that try to impair the democratic system must be fought against thoroughly. This combat, however, cannot impede the beneficial use of digital technologies in favor of democracy. This is the thin balance that we should strive for as legislators, researchers, or in any area that we work in. Ladies and gentlemen, in this international seminar, we have the privilege to count with the contribution of great experts like Professor, who is here, and I have already greeted him, Manuel Castells, Hugo Pagallo, Christian Degefal, besides panelists and chairpersons with lots of experience about the topic. I'm sure to say that the debate in the following days will offer new perspectives and solutions for the challenges that we face. So I thank for all of you here present, speakers, participants, and the organizing committee of the event. I wish you all a wonderful seminar, and that the new technologies could be a technology to strengthen and expand democracy with everyone, the participation of the whole society. Thank you, and I wish you all a great seminar. Now we hear the statement of President of the Federal Senate, Senator Rodrigo Pacheco. Good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to greet the first Secretary of the Federal Senate and responsible for the curation of the celebrations for the 200 years of the Federal Senate, Senator Rogério Carvalho. I also greet in a special manner on behalf of the Senate, welcoming Our Excellency Professor of the South California University, Berkeley, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, Professor and former Minister of Spain, sociologist and a great thinker, contemporaneous thinker, Professor Manuel Castells, to whom I would like to thank for the availability to open the seminar, which is an international seminar on democracy and new technologies, challenges for the digital era. Therefore, I would like to thank you profoundly for your presence here, and naturally we are all willing to hear the wonderful thoughts of Professor Castells around the current context of information democracy and the democracy that must have as a pillar the information, and it must be properly spread. I would like to thank for the team of the Federal Senate for organizing this seminar. On behalf of the Doctor of the Federal Senate, Elana Trombica, and on her behalf I would like to register, make a special registration of what compromises the essence of the Senate, the Federal Senate, which would be the servers, the public servers that work on their daily lives to make this institution an exemplary institution for the democratic expression. And I also would like to greet the General Secretary for the panel of the Federal Senate, Gustavo Saboia, the General Consultant of the Legislative Consultants of the Federal Senate, Danilo Augusto Barbosa, Giaguiar. And I also would like to thank and to express how happy I am to receive among us for the seminar and celebrating the 200 years of the Federal Senate, Our Excellencies, President of the National Assembly of Angola and the President of the National Assembly of Angola, Dr. Celina Cerqueira, and the President of the Assembly of Cape Verde, Sir Correa, and the President of the Congress of Honduras, Sir Luiz Guifarro, and the head of the National Group of the Parliament of Portuguese-speaking countries, representing the Assembly of Mozambique, Mr. Sérgio José Comunga Pache, and the representative of the diplomatic bodies of Angola, Cape Verde, Honduras, Mozambique, Russia, and the National Counselor for Justice, Mr. Luis Fernando Bandeira de Melo, alumni from this former representative of this House. Ladies and gentlemen, the press who is here covering this seminar, I also would like to gesture my respect and highlight how important they are for the Brazilian democracy. And the Federal Senate celebrates today 200 years of its existence. 200 years ago, we created the legislative power in Brazil. It was on March 25th, exactly, March 25th of 1824, where became our first constitution, the political constitution of the Brazilian Empire, where the fourth title instituted the General Assembly, composed by two chambers back then, the House of Representatives and the House of Senators, or the Senate. It would be needed still 2 years for the creation of the Senate for the Empire, which would be gathering for the first time only on May 6, 1826, in Rio de Janeiro. The delay was possible to be explained, and among the main challenges in Brazil back then, in 1820s, we had exactly the consolidation of independence and the integration of the provinces into a country with continental dimensions. Today, after 200 years of the Senate creation, we have different challenges. If before, the news took weeks to get to the destinations in Brazil, or the pockets of Brazil, currently the lies go around the whole world very quickly before the truth can keep up with them. If we had some risks of separation and national fragmentation, currently the political units are in the social medias that isolate the users in echo chambers and informational bubbles, limiting the dialogue and civil conversations. If in the past we suffered with the lack of data, currently we experience the excess of data, entropy, or the pollution of the information. Information with no filters, no controls, and without any kind of verification, in an ecosystem where what is the most important would be just to call the attention. So we have new challenges imposed by the digital era. The initial optimism that the new technologies would open doors for the democracy, direct democracy, for greater popular participation and more effective participation in the process of national deliberations, and for the constitution of a true digital mark, it was replaced by concern, radicalization of positions of all natures, including political positions, barring public debate, subsidized by attacks to the democratic institutions. I hope that the era of information would eliminate ignorance and also intolerance and preconcepts, was replaced by the concern from us all to the dissemination of misinformation and on the hate speech, with violent attacks virtually, and the proliferation of crimes, and there's no other names for that, but crimes in the electronic media. And the expectation for the society that we would have a more free society, more fair and solidary society, was also replaced by the concern to the loss of privacy and the improper use of personal data, and threats to civil freedom and risks to individual rights, ensuring with a fundamental aspect. And all of those violations that did not exist 200 years ago create the starting point and the main driving force of this international seminar around the challenges of the digital era for democracy. And in the following 3 days, we will have the privilege, and the huge privilege, of listening to the greatest experts around the world about the impact of new technologies on democratic regimes, including Professor Manuel Castells, whose outstanding sentence about information, just a while ago he was saying about the importance of it. Internet and an educated country makes the country progress. Internet and an uneducated country generates stupidity. And this is the greatest challenge for Brazil, to become an educated nation where the population can make of this outstanding instrument of progress and happiness and development for our nation. The seminar is a unique occasion, so the political agents and experts, technicians, academia, citizens can together think around the risks and the opportunities, the problems and the solutions for the present and the future of democracy. It's above all a call for collaborative actions and for active engagement of all sectors of our society, for building a stronger democracy and digitally resilient. I thank, on behalf of the Brazilian Federal Senate, to all the participants of this seminar, the senators, federal representatives, parliament members who are here present with us, speakers, panelists, moderators, chairpersons, and lots of you who came from very far. I thank you all, the organizing committee for this event, and mainly all the audience who presentially or virtually are with us in this international seminar. I wish you all a great seminar, great working days, very productive days, and as the President of the Federal Senate and the National Congress, I expect anxiously the forwarding for the conclusions of the seminar for the challenges of the digital area, above all to preserve untouchable the democracy, the Brazilian democracy. Thank you.
So now we will undo the opening table so that we can have our Magna class, Characteristics of Communication in the Digital Era, given by Manuel Castells. We inform that all those inscribed will have the right to a certificate of participation of the seminar, which has a total of 20 hours. To get your certificate at the end of the seminar, you must access the QR code that is available in the entry of this auditorium. And those who are participating remotely, you can register for your certificate at the Senate TV channel. We communicate that these events are being broadcasted live on TV.
Aos 200 anos de criação do Senado. Hoje, a partir das 15 horas, o espetáculo artístico e musical Senado 200 anos, uma jornada histórica rumo ao futuro, com regência e direção musical do maestro João Carlos Martins, hoje a partir das 15
entendi. Então tá. Então agora já começou. Mas agora já começou o seminário. Hã? O seminário começou. Nossa, eu não estou te ouvindo, Sabrina.
Prosseguimento ao seminário internacional Democracia e Novas Tecnologias, Desafios da Era Digital, com a aula magna A Política na Sociedade Digital, ministrada pelo professor Manuel Castells. Compõe a mesa o primeiro secretário do Senado Federal e presidente da Comissão Curadora dos 200 anos do Senado Brasileiro, senador Rogério Carvalho, e o professor das universidades do sul da Califórnia, Berkeley, MIT, Oxford e Cambridge, e ex-ministro da Espanha, senhor Manuel Castro.
Oxford and Cambridge, and former Minister of Spain, Manuel Castos. So the floor goes to Senator Rogério Carvalho, who will moderate this presentation. Well, as was everything has been said, my job is quite brief here at the table. So, as the professor was presented already 3 times, he's been very well introduced, and everybody is familiar with him. Everybody who is here have read or heard about his work, his academic production. So I will just immediately pass the floor to Professor Manuel Castells so that he can begin his presentation. You have the floor. Good morning.
Senador Rogério de Carvalho, senadores,
senators,
autoridades presentes,
all the officials present, and distinguished audience.
En primer lugar,
first of all, allow me to present my apologies for speaking in Spanish. I understand Portuguese, but my Portuñol works more or less, but I need a week to activate it. And I arrived yesterday, but I understand perfectly in conversation and interactions in Portuguese. So above all, and first of all, I'd like to thank from the depths of my heart, the Federal Senate, especially the President of the Federal Senate, Senator Rodrigo Pacheco, for his invitation to be with you on such a celebrative date, the creation of an essential institution where democracy is essential in the world, and in Latin America too, but in the world as well. Brazil is a country dear to my heart. It's a country that I have visited regularly. I have researched for 50 years now through several situations, starting with the dictatorship and with different administrations and transitions and the democratic milestones. And I will keep on researching this. So the topic that has been selected by the organizers of this event is a topic that is essential for the world and also for Brazil specifically. But the situation is not that different in all the democracies in the world. The relationship between politics and digital society, which are not just technologies, but this group of processes connected to digital technologies. So I will begin with the beginning. And in the beginning is that the relationships of power are the DNA of all societies. Because it is in function of these power relationships that we build institutions, we issue norms, laws, procedures that regulate our lives. Within this framework, politics is the group of institutional processes and social processes in which we coordinate these power relationships, which are always contradictory and conflictive according to the interests and the values of the social players. And that is why the most important phenomenon or the most important process of democracy is dialogue. And to maintain these conflicts and this necessary discussion within institutional frameworks that are tolerant. Democracy is a dialogue because conflicts always exist, they will always exist. The issue is how we manage this institutionally. I remember that based on observation, historically and political theory, power throughout history is based on the capacity of coercion or persuasion, or in a combination of both. In any case, the conditioning of its behavior lives in the mind of people. The battle of power happens in our minds, whether to adherence, resignation, or intimidation. Our minds process information and signs that they receive from their communicative environment. Therefore, politics is before all communicative. This does not have to do that communication and media have the power. No, they are much more important. They are the space where power relationships are constructed. It's the space where power is formed. Because based on the construction of this communication, it's like our minds are in relationship with society based on this environment. Therefore, politics is always mediatic politics. Not because of what they say, but what is not said. And the images that are projected based on communication. And mediatic politics, our politics of all societies, impose their rules to political practice. It's dichotomous. It works based on the presence or the absence of a message. A person is also a message in the space of communication. What does not exist in the mediatic space does not exist in politics. It does not exist. That's why the most important thing before the content is the presence. We know this very well, especially authoritarian leaders who have understood the power of this communication and the need to be always present as the center of the discussion, even if it's just for people to hate them. This was, above all, what happened with the former President Trump in the United States when he launched his campaign. He said horrible things, and they went against all the values of society. And then the media and social media would spend all their time talking about what Trump said, and what he shouldn't say, and why he was evil, why he wasn't evil. And he took over the media. Any other message was canceled, was ignored. And this was copied with more or less capacity. Other similar authorities like Bolsonaro in Brazil, Milei in Argentina. This was who would have thought that Milei could have been elected democratically a year ago to be the president of Argentina with 56% of votes? Milei also understood from the beginning his sister, who is really in charge. He understood that having making a campaign with a saw to say that he would cut off all the politicians that he didn't agree with. This was a message. And a campaign with a saw occupies all the media. And this is because all messages, all political messages in particular, they are emotional. They're emotional. Our brain works based on emotions, not on reasoning. First, emotions, and then based on these emotions, we rationalize a posteriori, as shown by history and the modern political neurosciences and clinical theories of Antonio Damas. This is something that the left has never understood. They always thought in the left that a good politics, that which is good for the people, that is well articulated with good economists, with good legal officials, this convinced people that this was normal. No, people work based on their emotions, because these emotions determine what the brain will accept or not accept. That's why proposing facts in democracy does not work, because what our brain does not accept is refused. So the communication given by each one is not to inform us, but to confirm what we believe. There's a lot of empirical research that shows this. Well, the most simple and direct message in this mediatic environment is a person, a leader. Because the texts, nobody reads them. In an experiment, people who write them, they don't really read them as well. So the key is trust in a person that is reliable, who is believable, who makes the basic tenets of a program believable, built by media technology, based on a simple message that is mobilizing, and based on that, a series of messages that don't mean anything, just so everybody is happy. Well, if the figure of a reliable leader is what conquers the minds, the most effective way of combating it politically is destroying its reliability in the communication environment. And this is what scandal politics does. This is identified in a famous book by the great sociologist of Cambridge. He showed that this is the fundamental practice of modern politics, and this has been happening for a while. The scandal originates, it doesn't matter if it's based on the truth, a half-truth, or completely fabricated, because life offers abundant material for this production of scandals, because the great majority of countries surrounding politics, there is much corruption, whether in the parties and regarding illegal funding of the parties, or the responsible politics or bureaucrats, or for the parties and intermediaries where you have a commission. It's their work, it's normal. You know much better than I the paradigmatic case of Odebrecht, which contaminated and in part destroyed political systems in many countries. It started in Brazil, but it went farther than that. And I could say, but I don't think it's the moment for this. I can give you so many examples from different countries, including countries that seem to be above suspicion until you discover things, including Europe, Japan, United States, all countries. The reasons vary according to the cultures of the countries. Puritan countries have sexual scandals, and others you have those related with money, and in other countries you have both. So not every scandal destroys a person. The case that everybody knows in the United States, a good president, President Clinton, with his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, he went on television, looked Americans in the eye and said, "I did not have sexual relations with this woman." And it was a lie, of course. People knew and they discovered it. And this did not destroy his image. And he had a high popularity when he left the office. Because there have been studies on this, because most of Americans think that all politicians lie, they're all liars, and therefore I like my liar the best. This is an empirical observation. However, it did not destroy this leader, but because each party and each leader does the same with the other one, and they all accumulate munition to attack the other party. So what you destroy is not one or the other person, but the political system, the believability, credibility of the political system. So scandals end up with in the judicial power the judge that establishes what is truth. But judges are not angels. Nobody is an angel. We are all angels and demons at the same time. And judges are also, they are not immune to interests. And the judicialization of politics is very dangerous because it ends up in the politicization of the judiciary. So we lose the last reference point, and we are before scandals, a lack of legitimacy, and in a downward spiral where nobody trusts anybody in the political system. And this can be, I'm not saying that it must be or will be, but it can be the death of democracy. So let me give you some quick data. I don't want to fill this brief conference with statistics, but let me just give you some images. The most recent one, in February of 2024, the Pew Research Institute of Washington, the most important of public opinion, to assess the political situation at the world level. They had a poll with a representative sample of 24 countries, including Brazil. Let me give you some examples. 76% of the average of countries supports democracy as a government systems. However, 59% say that not in my country. In Brazil, 62% say that democracy is the best form, but here we do not have democracy. 54% on average think that their representatives, their elected representatives, do not care about the citizens' opinions, that they do whatever they want without listening to citizens. 54%. In Brazil, 76% believe this. In the United States and in Spain, we have 83%, the same percentage in both countries. In general, 42% do not feel represented by no party. In Brazil, 50%.
el 58%
58% of them perceive the political system as a whole as a corrupt system in Brazil. 64%.
Y de hecho
And
la institución
really,
importante,
the
Transparency International,
important
muestra
institution,
el crecimiento
International
sistemático del
Transparency,
índice de corrupción en cada
demonstrates
país
the
en la
systematic
última
growth
década,
of the corruption index in each
incrementando
country
todos estos
last decade,
datos.
increasing all of
El
this numbers, all of
descontento
this
con la
data.
democracia, en paralelo con este aumento de la
The
percepción
unsatisfaction
de
with democracy,
corrupción, descontento con la
parallel to this
democracia,
increase
ha
of
crecido en
democracy
todos los
perception,
países en la última década.
increased in all
Y cuando
countries
le
last
preguntan
decade.
a la gente, a los ciudadanos,
And when they ask the people and the citizens what could improve in the situation, well, how interesting is this? On one hand, they propose democracy, direct democracy, without knowing exactly what direct democracy means. And that goes for,
contando con el sistema institucional.
well, without considering the institutional system, or governments of experts, which are more reliable than politicians. And the other solution, that have a great consensus,
La situación, dicen,
is the situation
si se eligiera a
where they say
mujeres.
that, well, most of them say that it would improve it if women would be elected.
Y el 62%
So you could see that 50% of world average
por
and
ahora
60% in Brazil.
parece que a las mujeres se les da un margen
And
de
for now, it seems that women have a larger margin of trust, because it would be something new up to now. Well, it's at least a possibility.
Pero vamos entonces en este marco, por tanto,
But then
¿qué
let's
es la política general, política comunicativa?
talk about the general communicative politics, because the practice in our societies and the politics of scandals and legitimacy crisis, how does that happen in the context of the digital society, which is ours?
Como la política es comunicativa, su práctica
And with the communicative politics, the practice is fundamentally impaired or affected by a technological revolution of communication. It seems obvious that it is currently digital, and it's also certain that, well, there's a data that some people recognize the characterization of the contemporary society as network societies. That's a made definition and absorbed the embryo 30 years ago. The digital society is not the name for the network society. The network society is a social structure where everything is organized around the communication networks and globalization, which is the global network of the networks. The digital society is the technological platform that organizes the society in a network. And the network society that I observed in this embryo 30 years ago, now it is manifesting in everything over full digitalization, a process. So it's something different, but it's something totally articulated. And how is that? According to a study mentioned a while ago and published in Science, it's the most important scientific magazine of the world, it was said, so this information was measured in the total of communication, where the information being communicated in the planet. And out of this total communication of the planet, 99.5% of it is being done digitally. And this proportion 40 years ago was 1% only. And it went from 1% to 99%. And the digitalization is operated through the telecommunication networks with this technology, mainly through mobile devices. And that's how communication was transformed. So the distinction that I proposed some while ago, we went from the mass communication with the traditional means like TV that are based on the broadcast of from a broadcaster to several recipients, and that's mass communication, and that was transformed into high mass communication that are those that broadcast and receive, and they're the same people. Therefore, each of them would choose who they would send the message to, or what kind of message, how to set up that message, and what are the messages that they would accept receiving or not. So it is a horizontal communication and not a vertical communication. In other words, it is interactive communication where in the networks, all of them issue and receive messages, where we try to select those that will receive the message, and we make a constant reference to a hyper-communication text, which is accessible to all parts. And in 99.5% of the situations. Currently, out of the 8 million people of the world, 67% have access to the internet. And of course, that is still, well, everybody, well, we still have 33% without internet connection, but that has been changing quickly while my generation vanishes. In Brazil, 84% of people have access to the internet. 84% of the Brazilian population. So some have broadband, some others have not so broadband, very narrow bands, but they do have access anyway. And in smartphones, well, or a pocket computer, and with access to the internet, we have exceeded 7 million people registered. Over 8 billion population. And when we talk about social media networks, currently 5 million are regular users of social media. 5.5 million. 62% of the world. In Brazil, over 80% would be regular users of social media networks, and we have a fundamental point of the transformation. So what makes this emergency of technologies in this communication, which I refer to it as mass communication, and it makes what internet always does. It removes this intermediate part of the existing filters in mass communication, and in mass communication it's always been, and up to still today, it's still controlled by the governments or by major communication companies. Therefore, not everyone that can communicate, but only those that have the chance to it. And the communication companies, they establish editorial control filters. And also, thanks to the professional journalists, we also have a content control from the side of the professional journalists. And that is something which I would say that what these professional journalists control depends on the control over them made by the editors. The editors are also controlled by the companies, communication companies. And I always say that the professional journalists are heroes, daily heroes, because to be real, true professionals, they risk their jobs on a daily basis. Of course, we know that the companies that own the social media platforms are also a kind of oligopolium. And even more, we have 5 great companies, 5 major ones, and the other ones would be just accessories. And we see that the companies the oligopolics internet companies, they would be business models where their business models would be based on the volume of traffic, data traffic. And, of course, there is no interest in reducing this data trafficking. There is a minimum regulation, but on the other hand, well, they work with algorithms, so the higher communication is not fully autonomous because this is conditioned by the algorithms of each network. And these algorithms, each of them, have something in common. They leverage or encourage controversy. They encourage confronting. And why? Well, this has always also been studied scientifically, because the controversy activities in the networks, in all parts, in all places, encourage dopamine in our brain. And that's what makes us being addicted to that. And as a consequence, the more we are on the internet or on the network, the more controversies we have, our brain would be happier, and they want more and more, the brain wants more and more and more dopamine. And that is scientifically studied. It is correct to say that footnote, to say that the best company in encouraging dopamine would be Surprise, TikTok, of course. And the obsession of the US government with TikTok, it is not that that's a kind of spying. There are so many different ways of spying. TikTok does not send data to the Chinese government. It would be possible, like Meta does with the US government, but up to this moment now, all the companies involved are American companies, US companies. So we have one that is better. Better in what? Better in algorithms, in addiction, in the capacity to stimulate. Let's think that part of what happens in the social media is something like a drug, a mental drug, and therefore the deep, they are like drug traffickers, and TikTok, narco trafficking would be, drug dealers would be more effective, and they are sweeping Facebook, and that's why Facebook is running away from the metaverse universe. But in all the cases, each case, well, increasingly, this data traffic is being encouraged and stimulated, and it's not being regulated. And why is that? Because the appropriation of data and the commercial use of data among publicity and other ways of commercialization and trade represents 95% of financial entries at Meta, 81% in Google, and 98% of financial entries of TikTok. And the same goes for others. The higher regulation then is scarce. And we believed naively in those golden days of Silicon Valley, where I was raised, where it would be highly positive to have free communication. And finally, we ran away from the control of state and the capital, right? Wow, that is outstanding. The best of everything, right? Well, it's true that the actors of these social changes they benefited in a lot. And the social benefits in Spain, mainly, and in Brazil as well. It is also correct to say that within these margins of the algorithms, there was a more free communication that we have. And the point here is that nobody thought about this user freedom. And we were imagining, and this was just shown an idea, what we were thinking that we were communicating freely, and the whole world would love it, and everything would be wonderful. That's how internet it started, and the virtual community started. But no, the human beings, as I mentioned yesterday, we are angels and demons at the same time, right? No, we are all with our demons in us, and sometimes we can be angels as well. It's an internal fight between the good and evil. Just to exemplify this idea, an internet, as it was said before by the President of the Senate, it is the reflect of what we really are. The great virtue of internet is that it allows us to look to ourselves and internet, and without social hypocrisy we see what we really are. We see what we are as a society, and we are shocked. One of the major businesses in the world is children pornography on the internet, which is connected to sexual trafficking of children. That's what we really are. That's what we are. And we have few. No, we don't have few bad people. That's what we are as a society. And if it's incorporated and penetrated in all spheres, social spheres, and in all policies and institutional systems, and that's what we are. And not only, well, and then we have our fight, and it means that the social media are saturated of sexism, racism, xenophobia, and homophobics, and violence, destruction, subversion, and besides that, the manipulation of networks would be done through misinformation programs that are stronger, and all of them are used by the governments, by the companies, courts. Everyone uses it. As it happened already, in Brazil or in the U.S. in presidential elections, and now we have fake news. As people say, deep fake. You see someone speaking and acting, a political leader saying horrible things, and if you take a look at it, well, that is right? That's deep fake. But now we have deep fake of AI, which makes things even much worse. And we also have very powerful groups in the country groups like Russia, US, China, and we could see companies funding and financing and supporting technologically misinformation. And in the case of Brazil, I can make it very clear, we have American millionaires and the Koch brothers that are conservative that funded the misinformation campaigns for the movement MBL in Brazil. And for that, we had the democracy crisis that I shared some data with you around the origination of the social media without any kind of regulation. And that would be convenient for all the politicians. Well, it's not just us. Oh, it's the social media thing, right? It's a social media issue. It's not our problem. Well, that's why social sciences exist. And the social sciences must have the capability to give empirically responses. And what we know about that, there's a lot of investigation going on around the world. And I would like to ask, to use the last 3 minutes that I have. Well, what we have since the early 21st century is that we have an extreme political and ideological polarization. It's very extreme among different audiences, different public, different people, and of course that impairs the constructive dialogue. A constructive dialogue among the different social stakeholders and political stakeholders, and with this show of totally emotional confrontation and without any principles of the political class, the citizenship drifts away from this horrible thing which is going on that has nothing to do to what we thought about democracy. Social media are the causing factors, and the scientists that forgive me, we can never say a yes or no. In this case, it would be a no and yes at the same time. No? Well, no, because on one hand, the existing polarization is within the society, and it is expressed on the social medias. And the investigation and the polls and the surveys show us that the most users of the social media, most of them, do not express extreme attitudes. No, they don't. And we can go beyond that. Everybody thinks that the social media, people that are dedicated only for the politics. No. Less than 18% of political content in the data trafficking for social medias. People share recipes, and they talk about friendship relationships, and they're looking for girlfriends and boyfriends, and they have a life in the social media. And what happens? Those that are very politically and ideologically radical, they also use the networks deeply, full throttle. And as they are the most fanatic ones, they are the most visible ones. And besides that, we have as an outcome that people try to find these groups on the social media, those groups that they are the most identified with. And they never look to the other groups. And what happens in all communication means in the US, we had an excellent survey showing us that people that the National Public Network said that people are democratic and they never watched Fox News or vice versa. So they would be specific silos. People would be in these bubbles or clusters, and they're not interested in anything else. They want just to know what their information. They want to reinforce just their own opinions, and I believe that we have lots of indicators of what I'm talking about here. If you want something very simple to understand, is that the polarization in the US and Brazil is the political and ideological polarization. It's the most intense of all, and among the users over 60 years of age, and among these users that are less educated as well.
And these are precisely the groups that use the internet the least. So the groups that use the internet the least are the most polarized. So it has nothing to do with this. It does. What happens is that for the group of the population, it's not the social media that determines it, but for these radicalized groups that are important and that have been increasing in recent years, 10, 20 years. So they increase their polarization and they amplify it with social media. This is what's happening. So it's not social media that cause polarization, but social media amplify, complicate, go more in depth and strengthen the polarizations that are present in society. And this is the empirical result of the research that we have been conducting. So, of course, we have to, the next question is that what are the sources of polarization? If it's not social media, they only amplify it, there must be a source. We all know these sources. We live in multiple crises. We have uncontrolled globalization. Globalization it's there, but there's several types of globalization. The ones that we experience now are out of control. We have extreme social inequalities. How can we think that people are going to keep accepting these levels of inequality that we have that are translated into everything, not only in income, but heritage, education, which is the basis of all inequalities. So it's normal that people have extreme positions at certain times. We have uncontrolled market, and people have feel panic before technology. AI, people say that they don't want AI, but of course, it can be useful for many things. But when you explain it, when it's controlled, then it's a positive thing, or else people are going to refuse it. And there's nationalism as an answer to neoglobalization that legitimizes nations. There's a rampant nationalism that's more present, and Europe is in a war of nationalisms now. And later on, We have a fundamental crisis of moral institutions that had certain moral authority, like the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is falling apart, especially in Brazil, with the development of other types of religion called the evangelicals, but is also fragmented, or in some groups it provides moral support to society. So we don't have the institutions that are traditionally moral. We could think, oh, that this is good, we are free of this burden. Yes, but we cannot live with some type of moral authority. We need it. And it should be democratic, some type of moral authority. And more we find data that there is a violent reaction in all societies against the advances that have been happening in fundamental areas like women's rights, feminism, human rights. There's a violent reaction to this. From European peasants, they are mobilizing themselves against climate control measures. But now we are protecting the climate change will make us disappear effectively. And there's a reaction in what they call in the United States, the angry white men. They say that what women, they think they are all that, and why are homosexuals getting married? They shouldn't be able to. And all these progressive policies to give the rights of people to be how they are, there is a great counter-reform, counter-reaction that is more and more violent. The famous hetero-dominant macho is dominating at the moment. There's the famous conspiracy theory that's called the replacement theory in Europe and the United States. They are replacing us, men, with women and immigrants and homosexuals and trans people. What is happening? In history, all advances in terms of human rights, they find resistance and a counter force. And we must take this seriously and not just call them reactionary, and we need to speak with them, dialogue, because to convince them, we're not going to convince them just with facts. And regarding social media, it's evident that we need regulation. However, regarding the amplification of social polarization, not the causes, but this is very, very difficult, especially considering that the companies and the servers are in the United States and a little bit in China. Therefore, how can we disseminate these rules in Brazil? How can we impose them in the United States? Because the internet is global, and we cannot turn off the internet because it's the electricity of society. It's extremely difficult. And on the other side, it's legally difficult in a democracy because we have freedom of expression, and we cannot say what can be said or what cannot be said. But there is hope. There is some hope. What is it? Well, what you can do, senators, for example, is in the order of new politics that is honest, intelligent, informed, and adapted to digital era. And if you fail us, then you will have to reconstruct everything.
pero ahí no sé cómo.
I don't know how,
La
but
única
you will.
esperanza es que
The only
las
hope
ciudadanas
is that
sabrán y de
citizens,
ellas aprenderemos.
women citizens, they will take office and we will learn more from them. That's all I had to say. Thank you. We are all very content and satisfied, for sure, with the breadth and the deepness with which the topic was talked about by Manuel Castells. But he makes me reflect that with this horizontal communication, where people have the opportunity to connect in a neural network, universal network, and it produces its own content, and unfiltered can place itself in a certain way. We are living in an unfiltered society, and a society that is increasingly expressing in common sense of people the basis of all organization and the most primitive side that is stimulated. It's as if behaviorism is the theoretical framework of this construction, where the stimulus, which in a certain way people receive, will produce an effect and increasing that behavior, but most of the time it's not a cause that mobilizes people. People follow something, some stimulus, or they want to be part of something. And when something does not fit in that environment, or a person does not fit in that environment, they are canceled and eliminated in some situations, or most times they are canceled. So I think we will have the opportunity. I think the decision of this theme, democracy and challenges to communication, or challenges of technology and democracy, it will be very, very exemplary to the discussions that we need to carry out for the pathways of democracy here and in the world. We have a great challenge before us. And as Professor said very clearly, it's difficult to regulate something that happens in two places, the servers, and it's also difficult to regulate an object that is in constant process of transformation. When we regulate in a certain way, then it doesn't exist anymore. It's already something else. And when we reach that other thing, it's transformed into something else. So we need to carry out a different type of reflection regarding a regulation system. How can we be innovative? And then philosophy and more vertical knowledge, more in-depth knowledge can be the basis of reflection, and not the pure and simple norm, control, registration, that which emanates from parliaments. Perhaps that's not the way forward. But yes, a group of new, as Carlos Matos said, who was the minister of Allende, new rules for us to collectively produce accumulations and new flows for a new reality. So I want to say that particularly I was very content, and I believe most of you are very satisfied with the lecture that we had by Manuel Castells, and I thank you all for being here. So we are done with our morning session, and we come back in the afternoon with the session to celebrate the 200 years of the Senate, and at night we will have the presentation, the show by João Carlos Martins in the Center of Conventions of Brasilia, the Convention Center. Thank you very much.
Muy buen comentario.
acho que o Tiago vai chamar lá do...
Vai chamar você.